On October 12, 2022, presidential candidate of the African Action Congress AAC, Omoyele Sowore, spoke at the 52nd conference of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, ICAN. His speech, his questions and answers interactions have since gone viral. But here are some 30 greatest moments of his memorable outing. He started by promising not to talk about any other candidate but himself.
Omoyele Sowore.
Good afternoon, everybody. On my way here, made a promise not to talk about any other candidate but myself. So I want to thank the leadership of ICAN for demonstrating better judgment than the Nigerian Bar Association, who did not invite the rest of us.
He also pointed out the snobbish act of a candidate who didn't show up.
I also want to congratulate those of you who made a bet today that one candidate will not show up. Congratulations, you won. And the candidate that did not show up, please listen to this, is supposed to be an accounting guru from Chicago State University, but he refused to show up at the most important accounting event in Nigeria today.
He expressed the country's displeasure towards unsustainable candidates.
The country Nigeria and the future of Nigeria cannot also continue to live or expect unsustainable candidates in 2023.
He expressed the illegality of the Nigerian budget presented by the president.
You guys are aware that the president of Nigeria just presented the budget of Nigeria a few days ago. I wasn't an accountant, but I went into that budget and looked at it legally and discovered that it's an illegal budget. Reason being that the budget violated section 12, subsection 1 of the Nigerian Constitution by way of the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007, which says explicitly that the deficit to GDP ratio of the national budget must not be more than 3%. We are now at 5%. That is unsustainable.
He went ahead to disclose his topic of discussion for the conference.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would have loved to stand in front of you and talk about sustainability. It's a very fantastic buzzword for governance. But I'm here mostly to talk about things that are not sustainable anymore in Nigeria.
He also brought to the table an illegal act performed by an accountant.
I want to state clearly, while you are happy that I talked about another candidate, but I want to talk about one of you that carried out an unsustainable act of accounting, which is the stealing of over 150 billion naira by the Accountant General of the Federation. That is not sustainable. Oh, are you saying that he's not one of you? Fantastic! Fantastic! Fantastic!
He stated his intention of ensuring the membership status of the next Accountant General of the country.
You must ensure, and I will ensure, that the next Accountant General of Nigeria is a member of ICAN.
He pointed out the reason why there are less accountants in the federal capital.
Great accountants, please, let's listen to ourselves. When Maokwe Ogun When Marakwe Ogun was asking how many of you live in Abuja, I saw only a few hands. And I was saying to myself, they are driven away the real accountants from Abuja, where they are most needed, so that they can do what they like to do best.
He points out the important pillars the sustainability of the country depends on.
I want to say clearly that the sustainability of Nigeria depends on a number of things. But number one of it is electing a sound leader in 2023.
He made mention of the stories of the leaders with selfish intent he had covered over the years.
I have covered a lot of leaders who, instead of serving this country, were serving themselves. I covered a Sikh president about 2008 to 2010, and we know what it cost us. I covered stories about the current man who spent an unsustainable long period of time in London treating himself. Now I hope and pray that we are not going to elect a bunch of sick leaders because our country is sick, and a sick country needs healthy leaders.
He talked about fixing the energy sector.
When you're talking about sustainability of this country, we must fix our energy sector. There is no country in the world that is going to experience an industrial revolution without energy, without power.
He expressed the nation's non-involvement with parties who are responsible for the nation's power flaws.
And I have said, and I will repeat here, that Nigeria have no business with any individual or political party that was responsible for darkness in Nigeria.
He touched on the issue of corruption and how it affects sustainability.
I have said, and I'll repeat here, that there's no country that can experience sustainability at the rate of corruption in Nigeria. People play down corruption because of the way the fight against corruption is dramatized in our country. But let me say clearly to you, corruption has destroyed our capability to exist as a people, and we must not take it for granted.
He expressed his need for accountants when he becomes president.
And I will tell you that I'm going to need a lot of accountants. It's not if, when I become the president of Nigeria, to calculate how much has been stolen from this country since 1960 and give us figures on how to recover them. And I am not going to be one of the presidents who will say to you, bygone is bygone. No, our past has eaten into our future. We must recover the past so that we can live a sustainable future.
He points out the future progress of the country depending on credibility.
That is why we're going to need you. And I have also said that Nigeria's glory, future progress is not dependent on numbers alone. It will depend on the credibility of people managing the country.
He expressed the need of advanced technology in preventing corruption.
We don't want a situation where money has been stolen before we deploy software. We want a country where accountants use software to prevent corruption before they happen.
He mentions how digitalization can help to retrieve the nation's loss.
As it is today, we are spending too much money chasing after money that has been stolen. We do not need that if we deploy digitalization of every facet of our lives. It is also the reason why we must sustain a process of digitalization and retrieve Nigeria from analog leaders who think by way of typewriters, whereas we should be thinking in digitalization era.
He assures the people his ability to run a modern state.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to assure you that as the presidential candidate and a chartered revolutionary, you will have, as the president of Nigeria, someone who has the courage, who's got the credibility, the integrity, and the ability to run a modern state.
He pointed out why Nigerians should avoid leaders who cannot handle personal affairs.
There is no reason why Nigeria or Nigerians should have leaders running its affairs that do not know how to run their own personal affairs.
He mentions the country's inability to be united and how that can be managed.
I heard from some of our colleagues here that the unity of Nigeria is very sacrosanct. I disagree with it because it's not part of the SDGs that Nigeria must be united, except we sustain Nigeria on the basis of justice. Nigeria can never be united, and it can never continue to be united.
He expresses his intent for free education.
I want to mention that I am a beneficiary of free education, and it will be a crime in this country to continue to insist from those who benefited from free education that the younger ones who are poorer than when they existed should pay through their noses to acquire education.
He mentions the solution to sustainable free education.
The solution to sustainable education is 3. Investment, 2. Investment, and 3. Investment. Invest in education. Give our people great access to education. Give them quality education. And to those who have been in government and those who are still in government, stop this universal basic education. We don't need basic education to advance because the rest of the world is no longer using slates and chalk to train their children. They are using computers. Let's invest in those kind of quality education so that our children can compete with the rest of the children or people around the world in the nearest future.
He expressed the wrong priority focus of leaders in the educational sector.
There is no basis for a country that cannot pay 1.3 trillion naira to ASU to buy vehicles for the Republic of Niger, SUVs. We have gotten our priorities wrong, and until we get it right, we can never do anything right. And that is why you should change your mind and vote for those of us who have experienced greatness and who want to bring it to Nigeria. Thank you.
He makes an open pledge to use a good amount of the country's budget on education.
Let me just quickly add this question to it because it is closely related. It's from Akinyede Felix Mayowa. It says, can any of the candidates make an open pledge for adequate funding of education, and to what percentage if elected? So,
to spend at least 26% of Nigeria's budget in the direction of education. And I mean it, because as I said, I benefited from free education in Ondo State. Anybody from Ondo State here? Yes, most of us benefited from free education. And we will be committing a crime against humanity if we don't make this pledge and ensure that it's implemented in our lifetime.
He points out the dependency of the country's industrial revolution and security on electricity.
we cannot run an economy on generators, what are you going to do about providing electricity?
Solutions. One is to make a very important point to everyone seated here today, that Nigeria can never experience industrial revolution without electricity. Electricity, to my mind, is even more important than security at this point, because if we get our electricity right, we will solve about 70% of our insecurity, because with electricity gotten right 24 hours in a day, a lot of the people who are constituting bandits, criminals, and terrorists in this country will have a job to do.
He mentions his intentions of focusing on renewable energy.
I will immediately go into using energy mixes because we are on the cusp of renewable energy transition in the world. We cannot continue to rely both on dilapidated systems and dilapidated ideas in the electricity sector. That was what led the party of our candidate here to spend $16 billion generating darkness in Nigeria. We cannot continue that. We must use solar energy, wind, tidal energy to generate electricity for Nigeria. We must rebuild our transmission lines, take them away from where they used to be and give us brand new transmission lines.
He talked about breaking down the electrical distribution system to regional level and retailing electricity.
We must break down the electrical distribution system not to be a national grid. We should have regional grids. We should have grids that serve estates, serve campuses, and ensure that we can retail electricity so that you can grow electricity on your roof and sell it or pull it together to power your own area without coming to Abuja to beg somebody at the National Assembly or the presidency to give you electricity. That is an archaic idea. Because this is very, very important. I hear it all the time. How do we resolve the electricity problem without discussing fundamental solutions to generating electricity? Countries like Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt, where Governor Peter Obi attended his, you know what I'm talking about. They are all growing electricity to the point that they are supplying Europe electricity. You know, I promise not to talk about other candidates.
He expresses his support for the ranching system and its importance.
I completely would go for ranching. The reason I will go for ranching is that it's safe, it's secure, it's also a source of generating power.
The question is
biogas.
How?
No.
Because we've seen just a moment, we've seen the attempts of the federal government to try and get states to yield land to herders.
There's a difference between grazing and try to grab land. The federal government is interested in Ruga. They want to grab land. I'm not interested in that.
He also pointed out the old and effective grazing method of the late Obafemi Awolowo.
The people that consume the most amount of beef in the country are in the southwest. Yoruba people. They eat any part of, there's no part of cow that they don't eat. Nose, yash, everything. Why can't they do what Awolowo did in 1956 when he had a grazing place in current Ondo State, Akuna, where they were able to supply beef to the southwest? You don't need anybody to come from Niger to give you beef.
He mentioned how modern ideas can be the solution of beef production in the country.
The governor of Ekiti State flew cows to Ekiti by first class. One of them escaped at the airport. They didn't know how to catch it. You understand? That is not governance. And if we are still using the old federal government system, then we might as well just keep voting for this guy to continue in office. You are asking me for new ideas. Let me talk about it. Ranching is the solution. Hydroponic ranches, not Ruga or land grabbing. Part of where Nigeria got to where it is today is the Land Use Act that Obasanjo introduced when he was in power. We haven't solved that, and you want to grab more lands instead of allowing modern ideas to give you beef. That's what I'm saying.
He expresses his dislike at a fellow presidential candidate's absence.
I don't like when presidential candidates are represented by their deputy. So, but you can have your way.
Sowore exchanging warm pleasantries with fellow candidate Peter Obi.
How you doing?
Sowore prevents security operatives from harassing his team and also a fellow candidate Peter Obi's media team.
Hey, calm down, Hello. Let's not join issues here. It's okay.
Everybody's got
It's
a
okay.
team here. Don't
It's
push
okay.
any team except you want to cause.
You tell your team to go to your way.
So they are with me. They are with me.
It's okay.
I don't have to tell you.
Duly
Please,
noted.
please.
Duly noted.
Tell him to step back.
Duly noted.
Tell him to step back. Step
Duly
back.
noted.
You have
Duly
to step
noted.
back.
Duly noted.
Tell him to step back.
Tell him to step back.
Tell him to step back. May he step back.
Tell him to step back. Yes.
Okay, he has now.
You have to step back.
He has now.
Step back.
Sowore is here.
Yes. How are you now? How's it going, man? Well done.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Yes. Sorry. How are you, sir? How's it going? Yeah. So you won't do that again, please. No. There's no explanation. Nobody should.
No explanation.
Nobody's inferior to anybody here.
Sowore, we know.